equations are considered equivalent equations if they have the same solution. Multiplying or dividing the same number to each side of an equation produces an equivalent equation. You will use inverse operations to solve these problems. Inverse means opposite. So the opposite of multiplying is to divide. So when we come across equations that have multiplication, we'll use division. The opposite of dividing is multiplying. So when we come across the equations that involve dividing, originally with the variable, we will multiply. Okay, so here's some examples of numbers that we'll be working with. So here's an example of an equation that involves multiplication. So we have negative 20 equals negative 4 times y. Now, students who like to work left to right can rearrange this equation. So if they would like to rewrite it, you could rewrite it to look like this. Negative 4y equals negative 20. Okay? As we work through this, we have to remember that we're not necessarily doing the opposite of the number, but the opposite of the operation. So we're trying to get 4 away from y here. So in order to do that, and it's not 4, it was negative 4. In order to do that, right now it's negative 4 times y. So we're going to do the opposite to remove it away from that. So we're going to go ahead and divide by negative 4. Okay, whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other. So divide by negative 4. Now we have y equals negative 20 divided by negative 4. So two negatives make a positive, and 20 divided by 4 equals 5. So here we've just found out that y equals 5. If we substitute 5 in place of y, negative 4 times 5 does give us negative 20. So we solved this one correctly. Okay, so we're going to practice a couple more of those. Okay, so here's another one. We have 18 equals negative 4y. Okay, you're not always going to get whole number answers. So in this case, just to give you a heads up, we will not get a whole number answer. So we're going to work to either change it to a decimal or change it to a mixed number. So right now I have negative 4 times y. So to get rid of that negative 4 away from the y, I'm going to divide by negative 4. Now I'm left with y on this side, but whatever I do on one side, I have to do on the other side of the equal sign. So divide by negative 4. I just found out that y equals 18 divided by negative 4. So there's two ways that we could give a final answer on this. We could reduce our fraction and leave it as a mixed, or leave it as an improper fraction, while 2 would go into each of these numbers. So it would become negative 9 over 2. We could change it to a mixed number. So let's see, 2 would go into 9 4 times, which puts me at 8. I have 1 left over, 2. We could also use our calculator to change it into its decimal form. So if I wanted to use the calculator, I would just punch in 18 divided by 4, which gives me 4.5. So I have to remember to put my negative in there. So y equals 4.5, and there was 1 negative, so it's a negative 4.5. So it depends on what the expectation is for the answer. For now, I'd kind of like you to work on practicing changing to a mixed number. So I would like you to work here. If you're not asked to give a certain answer, then you can kind of decide which one you would prefer to do. Sometimes you have some equations that look kind of different. So like here I have a negative a equals negative 21. What you need to realize is anytime you have a letter that's just a letter with no number in front of it, it really means that there's a 1 in front of that. So now if I wanted to get a by itself, because I can't even leave a negative sign with the a, I have to go through and get that negative 1 away from a. So I'm going to divide by negative 1, cancels out, divide by negative 1. These two become a positive, so I just found out that a equals positive 24. Okay, key thing to remember, you cannot leave it as a negative variable. You must get rid of the negative sign off of that letter. Okay, so here I've got working with a decimal. So here, I would say if you're working with a decimal, then you could go ahead and use a calculator. I'm gonna go ahead and do this longhand. So I wanna get n by itself. If you don't like how it looks, you could rewrite it. It would look like this, negative 1.5 n equals 3. Okay, that's where you have to decide as a student what you prefer. So now if I look at this, I need to get the negative 1.5 away from the n. So I'm going to divide by negative 1.5. Divide by negative 1.5. Okay, so you could use a calculator to finish this out. I'm going to go ahead and work the division longhand. So I've got 3 divided by negative 1.5. When we divide, we move over so that we have a whole number in the front. So now it's 15. Divided into decimals here, so I have to add a 0, 30. 15 would go into 30 twice. Oops, that's a bad 2. Twice. And I have a negative sign, so our answer is n equals negative 2. Okay, so I'm going to write one up here for you guys to try. Okay, so go ahead and try. Let's do negative 45 n equals 450. Okay, so here I need you, as you're working through it, to show your steps and then solve for your final answer. So you can go ahead and pause your video, work through this problem, and then start the video back up to check your answer. You should have gotten n equals negative 10 on this problem. Okay, so that's working with whole numbers and decimals. Sometimes you get problems where you have to work through fractions. So here we've got negative 4/9 times f equals negative 3. So we're going to still use the same steps as we did with the whole numbers, but when we get to that final part of solving, we have to think, oh yeah, we're working with a fraction. So originally, if this was a whole number right here, I would say, well, I'm going to divide by negative whatever the number is. Well, we're still going to do that. I'm going to divide by negative 4/9. Cross it out. And for now, when we get fractions, I want you to work in fraction form. So over here, when I write it, instead of writing it underneath, I'm going to write it behind here. Divide by negative 4/9. Okay, so when we divide fractions, here we have a whole number, we're going to have to first change that to a improper fraction. And then our saying is keep, change, flip. So we're going to keep negative 3/1. We're going to change to multiplying, and we're going to flip the last fraction, negative 9/4. Okay, now we can see if we can cross cancel, which we can't. So we'll go ahead and multiply straight across. 3 times 9 is 27 over 1 times 4 is 4. We have 2 negative signs, so it makes it a positive 27/4. Now, as you're doing these, you should go through and change them to mixed numbers. So let's see, 4 would go into 27. 6 times 4 is 24. I have 3 left over, so that's my top number, over what I divided by of 4. So final answer is 6 3/4. So F equals 6 3/4. And it was positive because there were 2 negatives. Okay, so let's try another one. Okay, so we have 3/4 G equals negative 12. So we want to get the 3/4 out of there. So we're going to divide by 3/4. divide by 3/4. Okay, so instead of writing it out the way that I just did, I should have written it out behind. So I'm going to go ahead and erase that and write it behind just so I know which fraction I'm supposed to flip. So divide, by 3/4. Okay, so we'll change this to over 1. And we're going to keep negative 12 over 1. We're going to change to multiplying, and we're going to flip. So it's now 4 over 3. Okay, so we're going to see if we can cross cancel. So here I can see between 12 and 3 that 3 would go into each of those. So 3 would go into 3 once and into 12 4 times. And now when I multiply straight across, 4 times 4 is 16 over 1, so I can keep it as 16. I had one negative sign, so it's a negative 16. So G equals negative 16 as a final answer. All right, let's have you guys try one. Now, on this one, if you'd like to use a calculator to help you with cross-canceling or in the reduction, you may do so. So I would like you to go ahead, pause your video, work your way through this problem, and then check back in just a second to see what your final answer is. So you should have gotten C equals negative 854. Okay, so that's working multiplication when multiplication is originally involved in the problem. Now we're going to go ahead and look at some division problems. So here's a way that they could show division. So they're going to have a letter or a number over another letter or number. So here I would read this as M divided by 3 equals negative 6. So we're going to go ahead and work the opposite. So instead of dividing by 3, we're actually going to take it times 3. And really we're taking it times 3 over 1, or we're doing the reciprocal of whatever's there. Why do we do the reciprocal? Because it cross cancels here. Okay, which cancels out the 3. So there I took it times 3 over 1. So over here I'm going to go times 3 over 1, which since I'm working with a whole number, I can just write it out as times 3. So now I get M equals 6 times 3 is 18. And there was one negative, so I get negative 18. If we want to check ourselves, we can put a negative 18 in here. 18 divided by 3 is 6. There's one negative, so it did give us negative 6. Okay, so here you're working a decimal. So if you'd like to use a calculator on this one, you may. So as I work through this one, I'm seeing it's D divided by 4.5. So the opposite of division is we're going to take it times 4.5. And that's so these will cancel out because it was 4.5 over 1. So times 4.5. Okay, so here we're solving for a variable and checking to see if you really know those steps. So if you'd like to use the calculator, you may do so. So I'm going to go ahead and punch it in as 48 times 4.5. And when I do that, I get D equals 216. And that's positive because we are only working positive numbers. All right. try one more and then I'll have you guys do one. So we've got f divided by 8. Okay, so right now it's dividing by 8, so we're going to go ahead and times 8. So times 8 over 1. So we can cross cancel. So times 8 is the same as 8 over 1. We don't need the over 1 because we're not working a fraction on this side. So now I've got negative 3.4 times 8. Well, I know I'm going to get a negative answer, so it's going to be f equals a negative, and then I'm going to look at this as 34 times 8. And yes, you could use your calculator. So I get 272. I had one number behind a decimal, so one number in my answer. I get negative 27.2. Okay, so I'm going to give you one to do on your own. Okay, so here we have r divided by 2 equals 13. So go ahead and pause your video and work through this one, and then start your video back up and check your answer. You should have gotten r equals negative 26. Okay, so that's working with equations where they're already in algebraic form. Now we're going to work with some word format, converting them into algebra, and then working through those equations just like we did. Okay, so in math, the word of, when we see the word of in a word equation, it means to multiply. So when we see the word is, just like when we added and subtracted, it means an equal sign. So here I have the product of n and 7 is 18. So the product is to multiply. So product n times 7 is equals 18. Okay, now you guys aren't probably always used to seeing it like that. You probably are used to seeing a multiplication problem like this. 7n equals 18 is how we worked them on the previous slide. Okay, so now if I go through and divide it out, divide by 7, divide by 7. So I end up, that's showing my canceling. So I end up with n equals, 7 would go in there twice, puts me at 14, and I have 4 over 7 left. If you did that as a decimal, 18 divided by 7 would give us 2.5714, so I would just say it's 2.57. Okay? All right, so let's try another one. So the second part of this is going to be similar to what we were doing. The new part is getting the words written out. So that one used the word product for multiplying. Here we have a number times 5 is 27. So a number times 5 is 27. So this, you guys are used to seeing like this, 5 right next to the n equals 27. Okay, so you want to work to get n by itself. 5 times n, so divide by 5. Divide by 5. We get n equals, 5 would go into 27 5 times. You have 2 left over 5. And if you did that on a calculator, it would be 5.4. Okay, so I'm going to give you guys one to do. Okay, the product of n and 11 is negative 10. So go ahead and pause your video and work your way through this one. So you should have had 11 times n or 11n. or n times 11, equals negative 10. Then we would divide by 11, divide by 11. So you should have gotten n equals negative 10 elevenths, or n equals 0.90 repeating if you change it to a decimal. Okay, so now we're going to work with some where there's division involved. N divided by negative 5 is 42. N divided by negative 5 is 42. And I know sometimes kids want to write it out like this. N divided by negative 5 equals 42. You guys are used to seeing it in this format though, with the number over the letter or the letter over the number, depending on the order of the division. So now if I go through and actually work it, because this concept right here, this concept right here might confuse some of you. So you are going to have to work on writing it out this way because that's how you're used to seeing it. Okay, so now when I look at this, right now it's divided by negative 5, so I would go times negative 5 over 1 so they can cancel out. And since I'm working a whole number on the right side, I can just say times negative 5. Okay, so 42 times negative 5 gives me 210. So n equals negative, because there was one negative, 210. Another word that they might use for division is quotient. The quotient of n and negative 6 is 40. So quotient means answer to a division problem. So here we're just going to go in the order that it's stated. So n divided by negative 6 is equals 40. Okay, so normally right now it says it's dividing by negative 6, so we're going to say times negative 6. So that cancels out. So times negative 6. 40 times 6 is going to give me 240. So it'll be a negative 240. Okay, so I'm going to have you guys try one. So you're going to write the equation and then solve the equation. So we have x divided by negative 8 is equal to negative 13, or is negative 13. So go ahead and pause the video and work your way through this one, writing the equation and solving the equation. So you should have gotten n equals 104, or x, sorry. Okay, so the last couple that I have here are just working fractions, and really it's not any different other than you have to understand when they're talking about fractions, like what that means. So here I have 7/9 of q. So here is where I'm seeing the word of. So times q is 308. So 7/9 times q, so q is equals 308. Okay, and then we would solve just like we did on the previous page. So right now it's times 7/9. We would divide by 7/9 to cancel it out. So now I have 308 over 1 divided by 7/9. So I'm going to change to multiplication, and I'm going to flip to 9 over 7. Now, I'm not sure if 7 will go into 308 evenly, so this is a quick check that I do because 308 is pretty big. So I'll go through and I'll just punch in 308 divided by 7 and see if it goes in there evenly. And it does. It gives me a perfect whole number. If I were to get a decimal, then that means that it's not divisible. So I'm going to go ahead and cross cancel. 7 will go into itself once, and 7 will go into 308 44 times. Okay, so now I'm left with ones on the bottom, so I'm just going to take 44 times 9 to get my final answer. And when I do that, I just found out that Q equals 396. Okay, so we'll solve these fractions the same way that we did. It's just that now it's the word format, so sometimes that's a little confusing if we don't go through and practice it. Okay, 3/8. 3/8 of m, so times m, so you guys are used to seeing m right next to it, means equals 66. So there's my equation. So now we're going to go ahead and solve it. So we'll divide by 3/8. And then on the right side, I'm going to write it behind here, divide by 3/8. So we're going to keep 66 over 1. We're going to change to multiplying, and we're going to flip to 8 over 3. Okay, I can see there that 3 will go into 66. So 3 will go into itself once and into 66 22 times. So now 22 times 8 is going to give me 176. So m equals 176. Okay, so I want you guys to try one on your own. So I'll pull this one out. Okay, so half of k is negative 44. So go ahead and pause your video, write out your equation, and solve the equation, and then start the video back up to check it. So you should have gotten k equals negative 88. Okay, well that's it for this lesson. So good luck with these and just keep plugging away. Remember, you're working the opposite operation, not the opposite of the integer. Good luck with this one, you guys.